Yo guys, in this video today I wanted to discuss with you 5 of the main things I've initially noticed switching from PS4 to PC and what my first 2 months on PC playing Siege has shown me. But first off, let's start with a quick background of how I got into Siege in the first place. I got the console edition of Rainbow Six and I'd say about mid 2018 after a real life friend of mine suggested I buy it and we play it together. We played for a few weeks and I personally just fell in love with it. After those few weeks though, he stopped playing almost entirely as it wasn't a new game for him, whereas for me it was a completely new experience. The destruction, operator abilities, and the just tactical nous of the game just had me hooked. It was unlike any game I'd ever played before, to be honest. For the next 2 to 3 years though, I became extremely passionate about Rainbow and mainly solo queued. Sometimes I'd be in a 2 or 3 man and on the odd occasion playing in a full 5 stack. Regardless, I've been a huge gamer my whole life, but I never actually once played on a PC as I was mostly playing casual console games by myself as an only child or with my older cousin. Outside of the typical story that you hear of playing old school COD games like MW2 and Black Ops as a kid, I was such a novice to FPS games. I did however play a lot of traditional sports at a high level throughout my youth, so I always had that competitive drive that you really need for a game like Siege. Being truthful though, at the start of my Siege journey I was terrible, I was so trash. I was at the bottom of the barrel Copper 4 before there even was Copper 5 and was deep in the minus elo range in my first season, and that was without any type of smurfing or any shit like that. I occasionally look back on my old save clips on my PS4 and I can see that my general FPS skills as well were also very poor. I'll constantly be looking at the floor while walking around, not using cover to my advantage, terrible crosshair placement, laying prone in the middle of the room and so on. And this was before I'd even comprehended the importance of things like using drones and vertical control. Originally it was the great YouTuber Coconut Bra that I'm sure most of you have heard of that really inspired me to use different operators and try create solo strats. Looking back at my entire PS4 journey, it was strats like these that allowed me to keep pace with the competition and compensate for my honestly average aim as I moved from copper, bronze, silver, gold and eventually high plat, my best rank I hit being plat 1, never hit diamond. Of course, after playing thousands of hours, my transferable FPS skills and game sense massively improved, but I can definitely say it was mostly the strategy and understanding of the game that allowed me to flourish over raw gun skill. However, in the last 12 months specifically, I got to a stage where I was so engrossed with the game, pro games, PC content, and generally the overarching PC side of the game, that I felt like I was missing out on the party and the real Siege experience, if you want to call it that. Along with unfortunately console players being left in the cold with a lot of things like test servers, certain movement mechanics, pro competition, and let's just be real, lack of support from the devs with pressing issues like DDoS, mouse and keyboard, and so on. I decided that I wanted to take the step up and fully indulge myself in what had eventually become my favourite game. It's crazy. 2 months later, and here we are. So, now you have a bit of context of how I started playing Siege and what led me to move to PC. Let's head to my first 5 impressions switching from console to PC. Okay, so number 1, and this is a big one definitely. Playing on console and watching a lot of Pro League games and pro players streaming taught me a lot about movement and how to maneuver around the map in various gunfights, but even when I was hitting my shots, I felt like I wasn't able to fully weaponize Siege's movement mechanics. As I watched more and more pro games and players, it left me feeling like I was playing a shell of a game compared to what I was seeing being done on PC Siege, to be honest. The best, most impactful example of this for me is the Hipfire Lean mechanic. I understand that there are not enough buttons on a remote to implement this, but it makes you feel so limited after seeing how it's utilized on PC. I would often try and copy this mechanic by quickly ADSing, then leaning out of cover and then back in, but due to the camera's positioning, the capped 60 FPS frame rate and the clunkiness of the joystick controller movement, it would leave me massively exposed to being headshot. I see Hipfire Leaning best used a quick peek to gain information or to line up a headshot for a second peek out of cover. It's funny to say, but once I switched to PC and learned the various ways to use this mechanic, it felt like I was finally able to unleash something I'd wanted to implement in my game for months. I've collected many kills and sometimes even been able to back off from a gunfight by just exposing a sliver of my body for a fraction of a second and collecting information to know whether it's a good time to peek again or peel back to site or to a new location somewhere else on the map. And honestly, it's been such a joy to finally be able to use this mechanic. Alright, moving on to number 2. Player behaviour. I was expecting a much more mature player base, but really it's just as toxic as console. All chat enables more toxicity as the enemy team can throw abuse to the opposition, but there's plenty of bad language and toxic behaviour between teammates. Also, a lot of players are on gold ranked, get big headed and out of lack of their pros or diamonds, all you ever see is good night, get wrecked, you're bad and so on. It can be pretty frustrating as really anyone in these ranks, myself included, should be focused on a good game and improvement, trying to make the push into that next level of top tier ranks. I'd say there's slightly less team killing, at least from my experience so far. People still team kill quite often, but on console, even in the high ranks, it's a lot more common and it's a big issue really. Number 3. Disconnects. Disconnects are still frustrating, but tend to have a lot less of a negative impact. Due to the fact that loading times on PC are a fraction of the time of that on console, mid-round disconnects or ban phase disconnects are less detrimental, as you can usually make it back before the start of the next round. Often on console, a disconnect in the ban phase can lead to an abandoned match due to slow loading times, which sucks when you've been waiting 10 minutes for a game. And a disconnect mid-game usually means you won't make it back for the next round, regardless of how early in the previous round you disconnected. In a game like Siege, 4v5s can have a huge impact on the integrity and outcome of a game, and you can feel like you've been cheated and wasted 20 minutes of your time. One player disconnecting and leaving you in a 4v5, even just for one round, can be the difference between closing a game out 4-2 or ending up at 3-3 and potentially going on to lose that game in overtime. With the recent release of the PS5 and Xbox Series X, I'd really hope that with the hardware upgrades on these new next-gen consoles, that loading times are minimized and faster than the last-gen consoles, and these frequent disconnects and crashes can be less detrimental for the console community. Number 4. Mouse and keyboard. Playing against so many M&K players on console when you're using a controller meant that when moving to PC, facing other players with mouse and keyboard is much more familiar than if you've only ever played against other players that are also using a controller like yourself, making it less of a baptism of fire, so to say. This means that working hard on your aim feels much more rewarding, as you know that you've actually outworked someone else to beat them in a gunfight instead of just losing it to someone with a massively unfair advantage, that being M&K on console. Even though there are many incredible aimers on PC, the skill gap of console aiming is so much larger. A mid-silver compared to high gold's aim on console is much more of a gap compared to the same rank difference on PC. A big part of why I wanted to switch to PC was that I felt I had good core fundamentals and understanding of the game and its ever-evolving meta, but I was being held back by having average and inconsistent aim. There's also next to no software apps like Aim Labs on console to really help hone in and focus on various aspects of your gun skill mechanics. Dying on console to a crazy shot can leave you paranoid, and rightly so to be honest, questioning whether that person is using mouse and keyboard. On PC for me, so far at least, dying to a great shot or crazy flick just means that that person has better aim, and you need to work on your aim to keep pace. Everybody has a mouse and everybody has a keyboard, simple. It's definitely much more of a level playing field in my opinion, even if someone gets more frames on their monitor or has a more fancy mouse than yours. On to the fifth and final point, cheaters. Talking on paranoia, people are a lot more paranoid about death cams due to cheaters, specifically in regard to closet cheaters. As mentioned before, there are so many outstanding aimers on PC leading to some unreal shots being hit. Combine this with the sheer amount of cheaters in high ranked and even a fair amount in the lower ranks, along with the general stigma that surrounds PC gaming, there's often death cams that leave players with paranoia on whether that player is legit or not. With M&K on console, not always but often, it's more noticeable. However, closet cheaters on PC can be harder to identify and subsequently can leave you playing mind games on yourself. In a game like Siege, confidence is such a huge part of winning rounds and even more specifically winning gunfights, so having these overarching doubts about enemy players before even a minute of the game has been played, I'm sure can be difficult. You see a lot of all chat messages accusing the enemy team of cheating, nice hacks, why cheat, and so on. Similarly to when I started on console with the M&K problem, it wasn't something that bothered me. As I progressed further in my console journey and moved up the ranks, I became much more paranoid and frustrated due to a higher percentage of bad experiences with and against M&K players. It even started to get to a point where I would doubt myself whether someone who was legit was M&K and vice versa. From watching many PC pros and streamers, I see the same issue with closet cheaters. It's definitely not the fault of the player though, as it's understandable, but it is something that will negatively affect your gameplay on all platforms, and the devs definitely need to find more effective ways of counteracting it, but as we know, it's an ongoing battle. So yeah, those are my 5 first impressions switching from console to PC, and overall I must say I'm having a really good time, and switching for me is proving to be a great decision. Let me know in the comments below if you've switched from console to PC and what were the initial things you noticed, and let me know if you're still on console and what you see being the main issues that the R6 devs need to address and features that need implementing to rival the PC experience and retain and grow the console player base. Is it the casual aspect of the console gaming that you enjoy over PC gaming? Is it the larger size of the player base resulting in shorter queue times that you prefer, playing with friends? Let me know down below. And with that being said, thanks for staying to the end of the video, every single one of you that did, it means a lot. This is a new channel for me and I'm so in love with Siege through good and through bad times when the game's in a good state and in not such a good state. And I've been watching YouTube as well since it first came out, and that's a big portion of the time I've been alive, so yeah, I just thought I'd give this a shot. Please like, subscribe and share with your friends if you enjoyed and want to see more content like this on the channel. And yeah, I'll catch you in the next one. Peace and love.